Well, welcome. We're going to call our meeting to order tonight, our June meeting, and we're all together for the first time since March, so it's sort of nice to see one another. And glad you folks could join us. We're going to turn it over to the superintendent, Dr. Howard's comments at this time.
All right, thank you very much. I want to say a very special thank you to our board members, first of all, for helping us navigate and being patient with this scenario. It's not something any of us have ever done before. So the last few meetings that y'all have called into have been very, very, very helpful, and you've been patient with us. Before we even start, I think we also need to send a real serious shout out to our teachers and families and kids, because this is not something we've ever done before. And I think everybody involved responded as nimbly and as positively as they could, and we ended the year really, really strong in a lot of ways. So we're looking forward to getting ready to reopen. So with that, I'm going to go right into the agenda and ask that you, and Rusty, if you should see somebody try to enter, let me know. I'm going to minimize that for just a minute. But we do have a board meeting on Monday night, June 15th. So the reason our board session was changed is we should have been at GSBA last week, and GSBA was canceled, but we didn't change our board, which worked good for our cycle. It gave us some time, but therefore our board meeting is not until the 15th, and we'll have several action items. But we do want to celebrate some of our departments that worked really, really hard during all of this. And the first one we're going to celebrate on Monday evening is our food service department, who is still working very hard through summer, the seamless summer feeding. So we've got them to highlight. Our facilities department we want to highlight, and of course our teaching and learning department. So each month we're going to really highlight some of the work that has gone into preparing for and responding. But that's Monday evening, and you all can decide. We can set up another Zoom meeting. It's not a very long agenda, and it's primarily action items. So if you'd rather just do that via Zoom, or if you want to come here, we can do whatever you'd like to do. So you can let me know before the close of business tonight. In that vein, here we are. It's hard to believe it's June the 8th, and I am going to share some things with you. We had some materials that we sent to you last week that have come out from the state, and if you've had an opportunity to look at that Georgia's path to recovery, there are 3 categories there that you'll notice: the low to no spread, minimal to moderate spread, and then substantial spread. And there's not a definitive answer yet that we've been able to find on how you determine where your community falls. But for now, what we've been guided to do is look through this carefully and be prepared. We're preparing for a low to no spread, because that's what we anticipate our area to be. And I'll show you why we feel that's the case. If you look at, let's see here. There we go. Each week we get every day we get a Georgia situation report update, and I'm sharing this with you here. You can see that the counties in red are the highest impact, and one would assume that those are moderate to serious spread. And then of course, the lighter the shade, the less spread there is. So I don't know. I'm sharing my screen. Rusty, I'm going to ask you something, but I don't see my screen up there. Does that?
That's fine.
It's okay.
Yeah.
All right. Can she see it now?
Oh, okay.
I can tell this angle.
Where do we go? We're supposed to be looking at your screen?
Or your screen if you're in the e-board. Okay. Can I see it?
All right.
So if you click on the opening of the school report,
That's the agenda.
Click on
for some reason, if it would flip, like his is
the reopening.
On that reopening
considerations.
plan. Oh, is that right?
Yeah,
Okay.
and then you're gonna go on.
there you go. There you go. That's what you should
Oh.
be looking at.
Come over.
Oh,
to
the report.
the-
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Now we made Ted smaller. That's
Yes.
and
Okay.
the map bigger.
Yeah.
Ted, we were all just looking at you. You were looking great.
Yeah.
But it's always
Click on that, and then you'll see today's,
Okay.
well, there'll be something over here for meetings. And click on the meetings.
Okay.
So Jackson County's not even.
So if you look at it, like I said, we've been getting these every day, and I'm happy to forward these to you if you're interested in them. But you can see where Jackson County is now. Just north of us, obviously, is Hall County, and they are probably bordering on that minimal to moderate spread right now is how they are being classified. And as you can see there, that's cases per 100,000. So right now, Jackson County, which is right there, is very low spread. So we're preparing as if, and we're planning for us to be able to go back to school. Now, we obviously know there's a lot of preparations that have to take place, but we are preparing right now under the low to no spread based on this data. Now, we've not gotten official word on that, but just so that you're aware, that's how we're proceeding. So try to close out of that. With that in mind, I provided for you sort of a timeline of what we're looking at, and I'd like to share with you a short survey that we're going to send to parents. And so what we decided to do is early on survey parents, which we shared some of that data with you, to just get a general understanding of how people felt. And Todd can speak to this at some point, but generally speaking, we heard that our parents, about 70 to 75%, were ready for their children to return to school in some form or fashion. About 35% said, they understand that they prefer their children to go to school, but they also understand the fact that we may need to use remote learning. Do you, Todd, want to speak to that at all?
Sure. So we had 33% that said definitely we want to come back face to face. 40.8% said they prefer to return, but they understand and are open to online learning if that's necessary. And 26.2% said they would prefer or definitely want to continue with online learning.
So the majority want to do online learning, want to return, but understand if we have to revert to online learning. So Rusty, I'm going to ask you to pop it back. There you go. Thank you. So with that in mind, we're preparing the next round, but instead of this being a survey, we're going to call this a questionnaire. And what we're really going to ask of parents is, what is your plan for your child? Instructional delivery model. It's very simple. We're just going to ask them. You can see there the statement at the top that said, can you see that? You don't have it in your links, but it's right up there. I'll very briefly just tell you, please understand this response you provide will guide the planning for student instruction during the 21 school year. The selected delivery model will be planned for your child and may not be able to change quickly depending upon staff conditions. So what we're asking people to do is, we can't start remotely and then, 2 weeks in say, hey, I changed my mind, I'm gonna need to be put into a classroom. Not that we won't attend to that, but we don't want folks to plan for it to be that fluid because we won't be able to staff in that manner. Yeah. We really want people to think, look, I have a diabetic grandmother who's living with us. I do not want my child going to school. Go ahead and prepare now for my child to be home. So it's folks who are willing to make a commitment. So what we're asking there is just their first and last name, where they go to school, and basically 3 easy options. I want my child to be back in face-to-face, or I'll continue to learn from home through some sort of distance learning, or potentially your child's not returning to school. So those are the responses, and we're going to go ahead and ask whether or not they plan for their children to utilize school transportation. That's another component of the operation that has to be planned, and that's going to require a lot of planning. So we need to know how many of our kids. We're going to send this out with your blessing tomorrow and ask for it to be returned no later than June the 19th. And so by the time we come back to you for the July board meeting, we can say we've got this many kids who are requesting a remote setting, but this many kids are going to be understanding that we're going to meet as many of the CDC guidelines as we feasibly can. But we are going to function as if we're in that low to no spread, which means that we're not going to ask everybody to wear masks. We will, we'll look at patterns of hallways and reduce traffic and so forth. But if you carefully look at the guidance there, the low to no spread doesn't require masks. It's voluntary, doesn't require social distancing. It just tells you to honor space. And so that's what we're leaning towards. But I welcome your feedback. What are your thoughts on that at this time?
Well, I think you're hearing a lot of your medical people saying that the reason you wear the mask is to keep the other person from catching it. It's not really. The social distancing is the main thing now.
Right.
Even Dr. Fauci said,
right.
Not that he's the enemy, but I was just,
he's pretty well informed.
And he's all for going back to school. He's ready to get kids back in school. But that's what he said about masks. So
We feel like we can do a good job of, and now I'll tell you, you talk about the operational side of things. Josh and Ted and David have worked really hard. We already have orders of hand sanitizer, major orders of all of the disinfectants. We've got 5-gallon drums of the BioS spray, so we're prepared to disinfect. I mean, they have gone to every possible degree to make sure that we have a cycle for cleaning. It's really, really ramped up. And so we're going to put in place all of those preventative measures, as well as you notice, we've got plexiglass at the front of all of our schools, and any intervention that we can put in place to mitigate the spread, we're going to absolutely do. The thing that we don't want to mislead parents, and we just want them to understand that kids are not going to always be 6 feet apart. They're not going to have masks on. And if that's the environment that you visualize for your child, then you should consider remote learning, because we don't feel like you can do school if you require them to be 6 feet apart and so forth.
Well,
So,
in compliance of a student wanting to wear a mask, I have to wear masks at work and a mask at work, and I take it off as soon as I can.
Yeah.
So I cannot imagine, how are you gonna keep kindergarten wearing a mask? How are you gonna keep a 16-year-old wearing a mask?
Yeah.
So I think it's a great option, maybe, but.
And if somebody feels comfortable doing that, then certainly
Yes.
they have that opportunity to do that.
Yeah. So, another question, Mr. Nicholson. What is what percentage of parents actually gave feedback on that?
Did you ask what percentage of parents gave feedback? I'm having a little hard time hearing.
yes,
Yes, sir.
Certainly. I can tell you we have feedback for 2,169 students. So it's broken down by students because obviously some families have more than one student.
Okay.
and we have 8,400 kids in the district. So that's about a quarter, which is about normal, unfortunately.
Now, what will we do about water fountains? I knew there's been some discussion about not letting them use the water fountain, we asked them to bring their own water or whatever. What do we?
Josh has checked into bottle fillers so that you can just put the bottle there. So we're going to try
Okay.
to have some of those. And we've also ordered pallets of the small waters just as a backup. Now, we're not going to start giving out water, but if a kid,
No.
I mean, in August, if a kid comes without a water bottle, we need to be prepared to have something.
You know,
So we've ordered pallets of water, and then he's also working on bottle fillers. We will close water fountains. That is a source, an obvious source that we'll need to be careful with. And we'll have to monitor the number of students in the restroom. You know, I mean, with the, there'll just be lots of things that we'll have to monitor. But I feel confident that we can do it. It's just going to take some planning. A lot of planning has already gone into it. So, of course, I say that because we get this COVID update every day. And that's our plan now. But if you notice, the next item is an alternative calendar. And I shared this with you briefly, but I'd like you to really think about this. And my recommendation is that we go ahead and approve this as an alternative calendar. And we watch the numbers over the next month. And we let our community know that we'll definitively decide by the second week in July, which is our work session, July 8th, whether we're going to go with the original calendar or go with the alternative calendar. The main difference in the alternative calendar is we start school about 5 days later, but we also take that fall break and absorb it into the Christmas or the holiday break. So that is a pretty significant change, but I think families probably need to know that if they've been counting on a week and 4 days off in the fall, that the alternative calendar absorbs that fall break. So there's no way for any of us to know if we're going to have a second wave, and if we are, when it happens. Everybody, I mean, people have said everything from going to start in September till you won't see it till December. Could be right in the middle of October. There's no way. But we feel like because kids have been out of school for 5 months, that we probably need to take advantage of those first couple of months of school to really get back to business. And it puts a longer time frame around the time that we usually see the most seasonal illness, which is around the holidays, to get families together. So that's my recommendation. The calendar doesn't have to be presented as next year's calendar, but if you go ahead and say that it's a backup alternative, if we need to go to that, then parents have already kind of been informed that October is questionable right now.
So if I may,
Please.
to try to clearly understand, instead of starting in July, this calendar is August the 3rd, and
Correct.
we're going to decide at our July meeting. Is that what you were saying?
Correct. For sure.
So what would be the alternative? Either we start when we plan, we either start here or we start at some other calendar yet to see yet.
There's not another, I mean, we don't have another calendar unless you have some requests or suggestions. Our originally approved calendar, we start on the 31st, and we have fall break, and we have a lot more breaks built in. This one that you notice, and Mr. Clairseed made note of this, and it's true, August, September, and October are really its first 4 months of school are full steam ahead with only 2 small breaks in there. So that's pretty heavy duty.
Are teachers okay with this?
We've put it out to leaders. You know, we are cycling through our school leaders, and we're doing as much as we can to reach our teachers.
Sure.
But they haven't been.
Well, because my concern is, there's a big gap in there. 3 weeks is a long time not to have kids in the classroom. So the teacher's going to be prepared for that. Testing, whatever needs to be done.
Right.
Your testing will be done before.
Right.
Yeah, like
Should
the
be.
cement
testing.
Right.
That's why we go back in August, just to make sure we get tested done
Yeah.
before Christmas
Yeah.
break.
And we still haven't heard whether or not we're going to have assessments next year. That is very questionable. I mean, I don't know. Now, if we have December testing, those hash marked days are reserved for potential remote learning, but that doesn't mean that we would have to do it. It's just, look, if we start to see that we're trending upward, then be prepared. So I mean, my best case scenario is that we're in school those days, but what we buy is a lengthier winter break.
Sure.
And we come back on January the 12th.
Okay.
There's, I mean, personally as a parent myself, there's benefits and drawbacks to both
Sure.
of them. That's a long stretch,
It is.
especially because they've been out for 5 months.
Well, but that might help them be more willing to come back after being out. I mean, I think there's a different appreciation to being able to go to school than many kids have had in the past. And so,
The other thing that I would say,
On the calendar.
yes, sir.
So if we go with this
Mhm.
and there is no bounce back, and we go to school in December, we take our 3 weeks at Christmas, we're still going, and we only get the spring break, we're still going until the 25th. That's all of our days. Okay.
178 days.
Okay.
Yeah, Gwinnett County did a different kind of calendar. They kind of took their calendar and modified the original days built in, but they don't get out till June 16th. So we took a different approach and felt like the other thing, and I mean, this is a policy implication that the board really needs to consider. I think for this upcoming year, we lay off of the attendance expectation because we have a lot of parents who are striving for that perfect attendance, and they will send kids to school with a fever. And we're going to do the best that we can to scan when kids come in, but we probably need to be careful incentivizing attendance too much this year because we want people, I'd rather them err on the side of caution. If you even think you might be sick, just stay home. Because we have tools now. We have remote learning tools. We've got Canvas. We've got ways that they can learn. And I'd much rather them stay home and be cautious than to try to get that perfect
So
attendance.
if your child does become ill and they miss 8 days, there'll be opportunities to,
Absolutely.
you're saying that.
they can have
okay.
remote
They can work
learning
from
home,
home.
yeah.
Work from home.
So,
Yep. And that's one of the benefits, one of the many benefits of Canvas. And it's not there yet, but I'll tell you, Todd will speak to it a little bit more. Teaching and learning team has worked that is what they're doing all summer, is to make sure that is more robust and more functional. I mean, it was very robust and functional before, but for all courses that they can possibly attend to. So Todd, I don't know if you want to comment on that at all.
Sure. Essentially, between the resources we have with GradPoint and Edgenuity and our partnership with Foothills, we have a good number of courses already built. But as we've transitioned to Canvas over the last couple of years, we've had design teams, which is teachers building out courses. And so that is one of our main priorities this summer, specifically starting with high school, to continue to build out courses so that whether families, students choose based on the kind of enrollment preference that Dr. Howard already mentioned, or if there is a second wave and we have to all be online, as Dr. Howard mentioned, we're already in a really good position, but we're going to be in an even better position by making sure that we have an increased number of courses that meet our Jackson County expectation and standards. And it takes time. But the good news is we've got teachers that are passionate about it, and we've got teaching and learning team who is very skilled at working with those teachers to build those courses. And our goal is over the next 5 to 7 years or so to be able to have essentially everything, so that we could, hopefully COVID is a long distance memory at that point. But for a child who just wants to be able to take Spanish in 3 weeks instead of an entire, maybe that's an exaggeration, but take Spanish in 3 months instead of an entire year, that would be an option. So the goal we're continuing to work towards.
It'd be hard to manage.
That's a great point, Ms. England, and I think the risk that we're running here, to be honest with you, is we're in such a complex, fluid time that we're trying to meet the needs of everyone, and we're still going to do the best that we can, but that's why we're trying to ask for some commitment on this questionnaire, that you can't just drop in and out. We won't be able to manage that, unless you're sick. I mean, if you're sick, you need to please stay home, but otherwise, fear is not a good reason to stay home. If you have a real reason to consider being home, then that's what you should do. And we're taking the same approach with our staff members. So I think, now the other thing I'll say is that, again, we're all building this plane as we're flying it. If you feel like we need to reevaluate this calendar and maybe push a couple more breaks in, we can do that. Like if we need to get a 3-day weekend, we got a 3-day weekend at Labor Day, and then we built a 3-day weekend in October. And then you get to November. But if we need to modify it a little bit more, we can do that.
I like this.
Yeah,
I like this because it gives, I think kids are ready to go back to school. Every kid that I talk to, they
And they're not
hate
gonna
being
complain.
home. They want to see their friends.
Sure.
They want to, be with other people. And I like it. I think it's good.
As we progress, I hope that we learn from this and we will pivot so that in 10 years from now, I hope we can look back and our high schools have more of a collegiate approach anyway. And that, if you're caught up and you're doing okay, then if you don't need to go to school Thursday and you're caught up, then that's the way it works at the college level.
Yeah.
And really and truly, if we're going to empower students to be the owners of their own learning, the older they get, the more hopefully they can manage themselves. And they're not going to miss Friday because of the football game. And they're not going to miss, there's certain days, but if we can de-emphasize the value of face-to-face time in terms of credit and just value understanding the continuum of learning and achieving certain goals, the time needs to be flexible for different kids. Now, some kids need to be there every day and 10 more. And just because that's the way they learn. But some kids can do it and have a little more flexibility and do some other things and probably enrich themselves. So I hope that we'll get to a place that it's more flexible and more student driven by need.
The plan is cleaning every night,
Yes, sir.
every evening, and then throughout the days, the certain surfaces and doorknobs and things like that. And we're going to work on making sure that every class doesn't dump into the hall at the same time.
Correct.
And control the use of the restrooms,
Right.
at least from a number standpoint, just not let a mob go in, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. We have, just for your own awareness, and again, we're responding as we feel it's best and we want your feedback. We've talked about if we start to see numbers ticking up and we're not yet in a moderate spread, but it's getting worse instead of better, we have talked about the possibility of bringing half of your students on Monday and Tuesday, doing a thorough cleaning and a remote learning day on Wednesday, and bring the other half of your kids on Thursday and Friday. So that would be the next level of intervention if we feel like, look, we've got too many kids at too close, and depending upon how the spread, we just got to watch and see. We've got several backup plans of things that we could do, but knowing that right now we're little to no spread, we're going to take all of those guidelines and follow those guidelines. If we start seeing it tick up, then we'll look at another strategy and probably go to remote learning pretty quickly. If we start to see a spread, the quickest way is to just shut it down and pull it back in.
So we start with in the cafeteria, will we start like we've normally done to begin with? Or are we going to sort of?
We've talked about spreading out the times
and
looking and having some students even in the classroom. That creates another issue.
Sure.
And it's not just a cleanliness issue. It's supervision of students in the classroom with food and sharing and the spread, that kind of thing. So we've talked about doing more to-go lunches and having more flexibility and reducing their time, not by too much, but the amount of kids that are in there at one time. So there's a lot of planning that still will have to be done. And we've got a task force that's working on each element of everything from buses. We've ordered the mountable, Josh has ordered mountable hand sanitizer instead of the gel that slides down. It's kind of a sprayer and it's censored. So when you put it in, it sprays and you don't have drippage on the floor and things like that. And we've ordered those to mount on all the buses as well. So we've got hand sanitizers as you get on the bus, and hand sanitizers in the classrooms, and then pivot points, as well as gallons and gallons and gallons of just the good old fashioned pump hand sanitizer.
And the kids will monitor each other.
They will.
Yeah.
I think considering what we know, we are in as good a place as we could possibly be. We put our orders in early. We're going to have the supplies that we need. We've got folks making plans. And we're very fortunate to have a team that works well together. So David and Josh are tag teaming off of each other, making sure that we got some common practices on buses as we will in classrooms and in hallways. But it's going to be, it's going to be day to day. We're just going to have to watch it day to day.
So you think this is flexible enough if you go a month, you say, hey, our nightly cleaning and our dailies haven't been producing the results we think, and we may need to add an extra day to clean and not have school or have distance learning. You think you're prepared if you need to do something like that?
We are prepared as a district to do anything. Okay. What I am also equivalently concerned about is parents need to go back to work. And so what we'd like to try to start as normal as possible, but if we find, then we can easily go to 2 days for half the kids, Wednesday's a cleaning day, and 2 days for the other half. That means that parents are going to have to get childcare for 3 days a week. And that's a component that, or some sort of supervision. Not as bad for middle and high school kids, but youngins it's difficult.
What about the AV block? What does that start?
But for the high school, that starts this year as soon as we start. So that will reduce the amount of time in the hallway because they're in the class longer, and that will be a nice transition as well. And we all welcome any feedback that you have. There's not a magic answer, but I think this team, I know this team has worked really hard to be thoughtful about everything we can. And again, I keep in touch with the regional superintendents, and we have a meeting every Friday at 1:00, and we spend about an hour and a half going through things. And there are similar approaches happening all across Northeast Georgia. All right. That was potentially more than you wanted to know, but basically from that conversation, there will be an alternative calendar for the board's approval to be considered if we need to put it in place in July. But it gives parents some lead time to know that October might be questionable. That's basically the only difference. All right, Ted, I'm going to turn it over to you if you want to update us on some operational project updates and so forth. There's quite a few items, as you know. July 1 starts our new fiscal year. So we've got some insurance and some workman's comp and some quotes that we need to share with you. So Ted?
Well, thank you, Dr. Howard, and good evening, everyone. We do have some kind of the end of the year, start of the year recommendations that you'll see just about every June, and then a few others. I would point you to the monthly projects update. It's got great photos through there from the high school project. If you look as well, you'll find the financial, in fact, it's on the screen right now, the financial statement on the projects. I included the high school and the air conditioning projects for the elementary gyms. Those are the two that we've begun spending money significantly on. But I will tell you that Empower has started, as has East Jackson Middle, so they'll be added in the next month as we begin to see those invoices come in. The next one on the list is the workers' compensation insurance, and Kirby Ingram and his team provided everything our team members needed to see. I will tell you that we're up a bit on the workers' comp premium, but it's primarily for two reasons. One is our payroll is up, and at this point in the year, we use an estimated payroll pending final budget approval and letting all the pieces fall in. We also had our mod rate went up just a bit as well, so we did see an increase on that side. for those two reasons. But I'll say also that Kirby and his team did go out and market it to other insurance companies, had some feedback from them, some that did not want to get in the game at this time. But we did have some good competitive analysis, and we feel like staying with Liberty Mutual is the right thing to do. Actually, Liberty Insurance Company in this case. The next one is the property and liability insurance and vehicle insurance. Dan Horn at Chastain's been representing us for a long time, and he and his team well again. We had overall a 3.4% increase on our total versus last year. If you'll notice one thing on that page that's up right now is that we will shift to a new provider on automobile insurance as a recommendation, and that'd be to Church Mutual, which has really good reports and recommendations. And we'll stay on the property and liability with Liberty Mutual. And you can see the premiums on your screen. Any questions on the insurance packages that we provided?
No, sir.
No.
All right. The next one is solid waste contract renewal. This is an unusual year for all of us with the COVID situation. So we chose in two cases here to recommend renewal. This was part of the original contract package. This is with Waste Management, and everything remains the same for the upcoming year. So you have a recommendation for an extended option year with Waste Management, and their letter, or their acknowledgement of our letter, actually, with Dr. Morris. The next item is an adult meal price increase. Dr. Morris, I think you're on with us. And I don't hear Dr. Morris right now, but I will tell you from what she shared with us is that the adult meal price has been the same for as many years as she has been in the district without change. So what the recommendation is a 25 cents per meal, breakfast and lunch increase. And it's required of the National School Lunch Program to make sure that we do have financial integrity in our adult meal prices. So I don't have it in front of me right now. Let me see. Yeah, breakfast is from $2.50 to $2.75 and lunch from $3.50 to $3.75.
Yes, we have to make sure the prices that we charge adults are inclusive of all the expenses that go into preparing the meal.
Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Morris. The next item is a short-term lease agreement that was brought to our attention due to a situation that the city of Brazelton, or the town of Brazelton, has. And they asked if they could use one location in our former West Jackson Primary School. It's the old media center for their antique store business, one of their tenants. This will be a lease from now through July 31. So it's very short term. There is no rent involved, but we did put stipulations that all sales were by appointment. And I believe you were provided some of that information before. So any questions on the lease agreement at this point? Or Dr. Howard, do you have anything to say?
No, Ted, I just want to reiterate to our board that we've tried to not make a practice of, Matt Rupel has been a faithful leasing there, and so we didn't want to step on his toes, but Jennifer Scott reached out to us, and there's a situation that needs to be mitigated in the facility that they're using, and they certainly don't want to lose the Brazelton antique market. So this is temporary, and I hope that if you would not mind, we could go ahead and take one action tonight and approve this, because I'd like for them to be approved so that they can go ahead and get moving in. We will save other action items for Monday night, but with your blessing, I'd like to be able to act on this for Ms. D so that they can, Jennifer Scott, so that they can proceed with the use of that facility.
And I'll mention too that I did have a couple of conversations with Matt Rupel, what I would describe as our lead tenant there, and he is all in favor of this. So if no other questions, I'll go to the next one. I did have a typo on the communication document. I've corrected that, but I haven't inserted it back in. It's a draft at this point that just puts together bullet points for our community just to look at our learning environments, transportation, school nutrition, large group gatherings. It's kind of a 2-page quick glance at our plan, and we will have that out sometime in the near future to share with our community. And I will add it back after this meeting. And then the last item of many is renewal of the grounds maintenance contract for 1 additional year. We'll take that out for bids next year, but during this COVID situation and really not knowing quite the impact on lots of vendors and their capacities, we would recommend staying with Penco Outdoors. They've done a great job for us, and if you just drive around and look at our schools, you'll see that great job. So we would ask for a 1-year renewal on that contract at no additional cost.
Pretty good deal.
Yeah, yeah, additional cost, yeah.
No
sure
additional
is.
cost, that's unusual.
Yeah.
Right.
And they can do their job.
Yeah.
So that's all I have under facilities and operations. And if you have any questions, shoot them my way or through Dr. Howard, and we'll be glad to answer those for you.
May I ask a question, please, Mr. Gilbert?
Certainly.
So on solid waste contract, is that just a standard, this is what you pay each month regardless of weight?
I believe it's based on, and Josh, you may, or Dr. Morris may want to weigh in on this. I've not been involved in that process, but I think it's on a pickup,
Number of pickups?
based on a pickup schedule. But Josh?
Yeah,
Okay.
go ahead, Josh.
It is based on a pickup schedule.
Okay. So is it, Josh, is it decrease some months? Is that?
In the summers, it does, and actually over the last couple of months, they took some off as well.
Okay. All right.
And they reduced our statement,
Okay. Thank you, Josh.
which was good. I was
Yeah.
surprised at that.
I will iron it out here too.
All right, Anna is with us. And Anna, I will turn it over to you for financial updates, and then we'll kind of tag team on the budget planning and saving strategies. But would you start with celebrating the good news with the SPLOST Fund?
Well, we have mentioned to most of you guys the amount that we received for SPLOST, which of course it was deposited in May, and it was for April's collections. And April was the month that we really were concerned about and thought that we might see a significant drop because of the shutdown and the shelter in place that occurred the entire month. But instead, it's up over every measure. It's up over year over year, month over month, and even compared to the average. So that's a very telling, welcome sign as far as what the economy is doing. And along with that, I'm sure most of you are aware that the governor announced last Thursday that he is actually reducing the state funding cuts from 14% to 11% because of the change in the revenue projections. So hopefully things are not as bad as what was anticipated or predicted, and the economy and funding is going to bounce right back. So that was a very, I mean, that was the month that I was worried about. That was the month that I was, I couldn't wait to see kind of how that went, because that kind of was telling of how, kind of how the rest of the things will go, because pretty much things are opening back up now. So that was very good news. And then if you want to look at the fund balance comparison, you can see that we ended the month at almost $20 million. So even if we were to use $2.5 million to get through the rest of the fiscal year end, we're gonna end at 17 million, possibly over. So that's a very good sign, and very good news, because of course we'll be able to use a little bit of that to help close the gap between between the state funding cuts and what we're anticipating we're going to need for expenditures next year.
Well,
And if you want to look at, oh, sorry.
Just one question.
I was just saying, wasn't 17 million what you had estimated some time ago that we would end the school year with anyway? So we were thinking it was going to be at least that much. So
Yes.
so that's good. Really good.
Yes. So the closer we get to the end of the year, it's much easier to project and foretell. So I have no doubt that we'll end at 17 million and probably a little bit more than that.
Yeah. That's great.
And if you want to look at the budget to actual comparison, you will see that we are actually 2% below where we are at the point in the year for 92% of the year complete. And we've only spent 90% of the budget expenditures, which is not totally shocking because of course we've saved the money over the past couple of months with fuel and utilities and extra time for some of our employees. So everything's right in line and looking good, and we're going to end this year good so that we can start next year great.
Absolutely.
Amazing.
It is.
Good news.
Great news.
So what the next document that you see is really just a working document, and you can see we've got some revisions that we continue to add to this. But I think the most important element here is that we're speculating right now. We're just projecting what we are able to anticipate. Anna will speak in just a moment to a spending resolution that we'd like you to approve for us for the month of July. Once we have a little bit more solid tax digest prediction, we're getting closer, and Mr. Sargent has been communicating with Anna, so we're not too far off, but we don't have an allotment sheet yet. So these are all based on projections, and I would say that we're going probably a little more conservative. In other words, we're really tightening up. So we've gotten to a good fund balance, and we've gotten to a good fund balance by being very conservative all the way along. So we're going to continue that pattern. But we would like to be able to absorb about that $6 million cut. It's not quite $6 million, but since we have already made a good bit of progress, we really want to stay the course. So to this point, Dr. Blankenship can speak to this more, and I'll speak to you a little bit in executive session about specific moves. But right now we've saved right at 1.9 million, a little more in staff absorption. So for our general public, what that simply means is that as we've had positions vacated, one of two things have happened. We have redistributed and made sure that we didn't oversize our classes. We're still staying within our class sizes, but we're absorbing those positions, or we're using district staff to go into those positions and support just to get us over this hump. So we don't know what 22 is going to look like year after next. We anticipate it'll probably still be somewhat challenging, but we see these as temporary interventions to help us make sure that we don't use too much of our fund balance. So 1.9 in staff absorptions, that's a combination of school and district. And then we're going to reduce the use of substitutes, which quite honestly, hopefully with the remote learning and the flexibility that we have now, that will improve. And then we had originally said, what about 5 furlough days for teachers and 7 for leaders? You can see that's a mark out. And I would say that from our perspective as district leadership, Anna, we've talked multiple times about this. We don't anticipate having to have any furlough days. If the allotment sheet comes in and we are a little concerned about where we are with the budget, we would recommend furlough days for leadership level only, not our classroom positions. So we'll just have to evaluate that. But right now we're in a really good place and don't feel like there's a need for furlough days for our instructional staff at all. To get to this number, you can see there that Anna's projecting we would use about 2.5 million in our fund balance, but ending at 17 or 17 plus, that's okay, because we really should run about a 15% fund balance, and we're actually at about 20%. So it's not going to hurt us to kind of pull down on that fund balance a little bit. That's what it's for. Just thank goodness we have it.
Exactly.
So, and then the one piece, just depending on how things go, we had shifted some technology expenses out of SPLOST to really make sure that we had SPLOST for our bonds and our construction. And so if we reduce our technology, if the numbers come in better, the two areas that I really would like to see us be careful with is technology. We don't want to get behind on that.
Yeah.
And the second one is, quite honestly, the general maintenance. So while we're not doing a lot of maintenance, the cost of the disinfecting and the cleaning and that cost may ramp up. In addition to that, Josh made a great point today during our cabinet meeting, and these floors or LVT is much easier to keep up than stripping and waxing, and so manpower for cleaning is much better if we can continue to replace some of our commons areas with the LVT floors. So if we find that we're in a better position, those are areas that we'll come back to you and say, look, we think it's looking okay. Can we go ahead and look at doing some of those upgrades? But either way, we're very, very confident that we're going to be in a good place with this budget. So those are our strategies to this point. And I will share with you in executive session some internal moves. I think this is probably a time to send a shout out to our teaching and learning department. They have stepped up and are really, really taking some of their experts and allowing them to be experts at school levels to help with the work that's happening there. And we'll talk about that a little bit more, but we're in a good place. So Annie, you want to speak to the spending resolution?
Certainly. So as most of you are aware, to continue operating, when you don't have a approved budget, we basically are allowed to spend 1/12 of our most recently approved budget, which would be fiscal year 2020. So this resolution that we're presenting to you guys is giving us that authority to be able to spend 1/12 of the fiscal year 20 approved budget until we are able to have a fiscal year 21 approved budget to bring to you for approval.
But fiscal year 21 will be $6 million less than 20. Is that right?
The only thing the state will allow you to approve really is 1/12 of your approved budget, or whatever's been approved.
Yeah.
So we don't have an
most they
approved.
allow you to use.
That's the most.
Most.
Am I correct there? I mean, Anna?
Yes, 1/12. Yes, 1/12. So basically, each month that we go into a new fiscal year without having an approved budget, we have to get approval or have a spending resolution to continue operations for that time period. So if for some reason we went on into August, we would ask for approval for another 12th of fiscal year 20's budget to continue to be able to operate through July and August.
Do you think we'll need that?
I think what Mr. Holland is asking is that our budget is $6 million. We're anticipating a $6 million budget, and it's really not $6 million less than last year's budget. It's $6 million less than the preliminary budget that we gave to you.
Right, than what we presented in March.
So the preliminary
Which
budget
was how much more than 20 then?
The 20 budget was, 21 preliminary budget that you presented was about, I want to say we added about $8 million.
8 million, that's right.
Or more.
Okay.
Anna can tell us exactly.
Yeah, I'm pulling it up right now.
It's a great question.
That's what I'm
Great
trying
question.
to figure out.
Absolutely,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, I do know that the preliminary numbers that I've run for fiscal year 21, it looks like our fiscal year 21 expenditures are not even $1 million more than our fiscal year 20 overall, because we've absorbed so many positions. As far as we know, the governor is not doing any of the raises that were initially presented. So all those expenses are taken out of the budget. So our expenses are up probably around 900,000 based on the new projections for 21.
But your preliminary budget that on March the 6th, when we had our work session, we were up by about $7.5 or $8 million, I believe, year over year.
Right. So then if you take that 6 million plus off of that, then we'll be up about $1 million, maybe a little less.
All right, so we'll bring the spending resolution to you for approval on Monday, and then we're still going to be very conservative in our spending. July is a startup month though, so it's the first payment of workman's comp and things like that. So there will be some heavy hitters, but Ted, yeah. All right, Human Resources has been quite busy. Thank you, Anna. All good news. We appreciate all the hard work. Every time we do an adjustment to a position, she's got to run a whole new calculation because she's to the penny on everything. So, all right, Dr. Blankenship.
Yes, good evening, everybody. So the first item, personnel recommendations, I believe Dr. Howard will talk with you about during executive session. The next item, though, is I wanted to share some results from our staff return to work survey that we administered over the last week and a half. And so what you have here are some of the charts that represent the results. We had almost all of our staff respond. We had 948 responses, and that's very, very close to all of our full-time staff. So what you see there, the first couple of charts just give you an idea of who responded in general terms by grade band and by content area. But the more important charts are the ones that follow. So we did ask our staff, given if the pandemic continued, would they be unable to come to work for any of the following reasons? And we used the wording from the EEOC and ADA guidelines that are put out, and it really follows those 6 criteria or 6 reasons that individuals would have to remain out of work based on the Families First Coronavirus Act. So as you can see there, about 18.9% of our employees said that at this time they would not be able to return to work. Now, it could be for any one of those 6 reasons, and we don't know if that is continuously not return to work or intermittently not return to work. So as we get closer to school opening, we'll be following up with those individuals as at least the ones that have provided contact information to us. But what's important for you to know is that doesn't necessarily mean it's 18.9% of teachers, right? It's all of our employees. So the next chart, we asked if they would be interested in teaching in an online learning situation. And we did give an option for people to respond if the question didn't apply to them. So for about 29% of the respondents, it didn't apply because they're not in a teaching role. But for 7% of those who responded, they responded that they would be very interested in teaching virtually for the coming school year. And I believe, if I remember correctly, that was around 35 individuals. We had about 24% who said they would not be interested in teaching virtually for the 2021 school year. And then the remainder there, about 39 to 40%, were either interested in teaching part of the day virtually or were interested but needed more information before they said that they would definitely be interested. So we did ask, while we sent out the survey anonymously, we did ask if they would like for us to follow up with them about any of their concerns or for teaching opportunities to provide us contact information, and many of them did. So we'll be following up with those individuals over the next weeks. Any questions on that? Okay, the next item is as we prepare to return to buildings, our support staff over the next few weeks, we wanted to give some guidelines, and we really wanted to do this in a reasoned, thoughtful manner using common sense. And again, these are just guidelines. There's no requirements here. As Dr. Howard has said, we're thinking that we're in that low to no spread. And so what you have is a timeline for employees to return to work. And these are decisions that are made by department. You have some safe guidance. So support social distancing, avoiding spread of germs, facilitating virtual meetings where possible, and expect and encourage face masks in common areas. So beyond that, we give some general guidance for visitors to the building, some guidance for entering and exiting the building for staff, and then just how to generally go about your day, whether you're in an enclosed office space, an open concept office space, in our common areas, and then if you have to have a face-to-face meeting. We have shared these guidelines with our principals and schools, and it's also been shared on our website, and a communication was sent out as well. We are going to begin to be open by appointment for visitors starting June 15th. And we will also have someone answering the phones. We have phones routed now, but we'll actually have someone answering the phone live starting June 15th. And then the last item is just to share a little bit with you about new employee orientation plans. We have begun our onboarding process, and new Teaching and Learning has begun their new teacher orientation professional learning sessions, and both of those things are going very, very well virtually. But at the beginning of the school year, we always do a big welcome back meeting where we provide some information to employees, as well as just generally honestly, the importance of that day is to welcome these new teachers into our system and begin to help them feel like a part of our family. And while we're not able to do that this year, we do have plans to go and meet with those new employees in small groups in their building and celebrate them, share with them some welcome goodies, and just generally begin to make them feel welcome into our school families. And that's all I have, Dr. Howard.
Very good, thank you.
Not to speak back on that.
Please.
Just that last thing you said, Dr. Blankenship. I think that's where you talked about welcoming these new teachers, and I think that'd be a great opportunity for the PTO to help with that.
Absolutely.
We have some pretty good PTOs. I know in the elementary school, South Jackson and East Jackson Middle School as well. And they look for opportunities like that.
That's a great idea, Mr. Hollett. We're just beginning those plans. We have some goodie bags that we had begun to put together with our business partners who normally sponsor new teacher orientation, but I love that idea of getting the PTOs in on it. That would be a great addition. So thank you for that.
All right, that launch pad is really awesome. That's a very, and I can't remember if we've shown that to you or not, but I'll show it. I'm happy to show it to you. It's on our website, but it's a one-stop shop for all of our new staff members. That's very beneficial. So. All right, Mr. Nicholson, everybody's been busy at work among the Teaching and Learning group. So.
Absolutely, and we've already spoken to the first two items. The first one, the instructional design plans, it was the conversation we had at the beginning of this meeting regarding the delivery models that we're preparing for, whether it's some students select to be online and the majority return. And then just so you know, we're still taking in the data, the feedback from what we did this, from March 16th through the end of the school year. And, heaven forbid if we have to do this again, our teachers, our leaders, our school system did an amazing job in implementing digital learning, distance learning. There's no replacing face-to-face. We all agree with that, but we did a phenomenal job, and we've got some ways that we know that we could even further refine that. So that's what that agenda item was specifically to. And then I shared the parent feedback data with you already, just knowing that our parents seem to be exceptionally understanding of the situation, and people want to come back to normal. They want to be able to return, but it seems like folks also realize that if for some reason we have to go back into this distance learning, that they're receptive to it. And obviously, again, the preference is face-to-face for about 70+%, but we do want to be able to pursue the 25% or so that are interested in it. That corresponds also with the numbers that Dr. Blankenship shared with the teachers that maybe can't return to a face-to-face environment for health reasons, and use that as an opportunity to really expedite the online learning that we've talked about for many years now, about students working at their own pace and place. That's not for everybody, but for some students, they can really excel in that environment. And some teachers have really demonstrated that is their preferred model. So certainly we want to be able to take advantage of that and be able to provide those opportunities for our students and families where that is most appropriate, but then also for the teachers who could continue to teach even if they can't physically be present. So those were the first two items. Dr. Blankenship mentioned new teacher orientation. We've had a really remarkable week. We've had about 40 of our folks, our new teachers that came through. They were with Dr. Warwick and Ms. Godfrey and Dr. Peacock and Ms. Sane, and Cat Flippin. The whole teaching and learning team has worked with our new teachers. In some respects, I think people really like it because they didn't have to find childcare, and you got to know them even a little bit better because they might be having a conversation around literacy, but their son or daughter is right behind them, and it just made it real. These are wonderful human beings who have chosen to come work in Jackson County schools, and I think the teachers really bonded. We always prefer face-to-face, but teaching and learning has realized that moving forward, there might be opportunities where we blend the distance learning with the face-to-face, especially knowing during the summer when folks don't have childcare and that's an additional expense. But I want to thank our team, but I also want to thank our teacher leaders who participated, because we are a system of a size that allows us to tap into our teacher experts. And for every content area at every grade band, we had teachers who were also, whether they were co-facilitators or they served as a Q&A panel, they were able to connect with our new teachers and provide some authentic, meaningful responses to our any questions that our new teachers had. So that was definitely a success. And we have a new challenge this week. Teaching and Learning's Leadership Retreat is scheduled for this Thursday, and usually there are about 125 of us in the South Jackson cafeteria, and it's usually a full-day event. And Teaching and Learning has been working to figure out a way to do this via a distance learning model and segment out the day by grade bands. We'll report out more next time we get together, but I just want you to know some of the core themes that we will be addressing. And one of those is the student advocacy that we've talked about at just about every one of the parent advisory councils, 7 mindsets, as well as student advisement and professional skills. And I'm really excited to be able to, at some point, showcase some of that work. It's been a great partnership with our high schools and the teaching and learning team. Another theme certainly is communication. And we've talked a little bit about Remind, and we've talked a little bit about ways that we can streamline our communication efforts. And so we're putting together a handbook. We're putting together communication matrices that provide the schools some quick, at a glance, feedback, or not feedback, but guidance on how we can really streamline our communications. And so again, once we share that with our leaders and refine it, I'm looking forward to sharing that with you. And then we also have at the high school level the secondary learning cycle, which I think we've shared previously, but that's specific to the new schedule, that AB modified block schedule that we will be implementing next year at both high schools. And so we'll spend some time around that. And then elementary literacy as our primary focus. So we're keep saying we want to get back to face, and we all want to do that. But I'm very grateful for the team and the schools and the leadership that's been willing to continue to collaborate during these strange and uncertain times. And we continue to get the work done, and we're going to do whatever it takes to make sure that our teachers and our schools are ready for the fall or late summer.
Or sometime.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you all very much. As you can tell, Todd didn't talk about it a whole lot, and understandably so, but thank you to Michael, who is here with us, and Ms. Wheeler asked about it a little bit, but give them some of the stats on the Chromebook collection, if you don't mind.
We handed out about 5,000 Chromebooks, and that's both high schools all through. This past week, we collected up about 3,800 Chromebooks back in, and only had 36 that were broken. So
It's pretty good.
that's
Pretty good.
Pretty good, right.
That is very good.
Yeah.
Couldn't be prouder and happier.
And our high schools are able to keep
They're
theirs,
keeping them,
so-
well, seniors turning in, but
Right.
everybody else is keeping.
So that's a really, really good return rate, which is a testament, I think, to our kids and our families for honoring what we were trying to achieve. So thank you, Mike. I know your team's been at work quite a bit present. And of course, Dr. Morris is on here. I want to send a shout out to her. I don't know if she was here earlier, but each of our departments have really stepped up, and I'm very grateful. We would not been able to serve this community to the level that we have without really committed people who are just doing whatever it takes. So we are very, very appreciative to everybody. And that's all we have, other than if the board would be willing to approve the lease agreement for West Primary, and then a short executive session just to review the personnel list.
Okay. All right. Well, hearing that recommendation, do I have a motion that we approve this short-term lease agreement?
So moved.
Okay, and second?
Second.
All right, all in favor? Okay, that passes. All right. Did you have something else you want? I thought you were going to say something. No, you're good. Okay. All right. Well, then we'll go into executive session and be back shortly.
All right. If it's okay with you all, I'm just going to ask